Philanthropy and Community Investment, a very long title, representing the Coalition for Enhancing Communities. Has anyone heard of us? Folks, the type of organization that we are, we're a nonprofit, we're a community foundation. There's about 40 community foundations in Pennsylvania, and we all represent a specific geography. So we cover Cumberland, Dauphin, Perry, Franklin, Lebanon, and the northern part of York County. And in a nutshell, because we're a little bit of a complex nonprofit, what we do is we give money away and we help people set up funds. So does anyone in here know of anyone or have kiddos that are either graduating from high school or will soon be graduating? Okay. Please make sure that you are aware of our scholarship opportunities. We gave away last year over $1 million to local students and scholarships. So we have about 250 scholarship funds. They're mostly closed for the year because we're already at the end of the academic year, but they open up in January. So please check our website and make sure that you are aware of and share with those in your families and networks the opportunity to apply for scholarships, because we have a lot of money that generous donors have given to us for us to then give out to the community in the form of scholarships. The other thing is, if any of you represent, know of, encounter, work for nonprofit organizations, please make sure that you're aware of our organization as well, because we do competitive grant making to the local nonprofit community. We do about 15 rounds of competitive grant making every year to the nonprofit community. Some nonprofits specifically support women and girls, some support children, some support families. There's all sorts of different rules and guidelines for each of those grant opportunities, but please make sure that you're aware of them, because we do grant a good bit of money back to the nonprofit community. And then on the other side of the coin, what we offer is if someone is ever interested in setting up a scholarship fund, maybe you're passionate about giving the gift of education, we can work with you to help set up that scholarship fund and then administer it, which is where the scholarship making part comes in. So we have about 900 charitable funds that donors have given us that funding and then told us what to do with it charitably. That comes into play with, that's the money then that we're giving away to the nonprofits, that's the money we're giving away to students in the form of scholarships. If you know of any young professionals, 20s, 30s, even young 40-somethings, we offer a program to teach the next generation how to get involved in their community and give back. It's called the Emerging Philanthropist Program. We have an early education program. So if you know of anyone with little ones, pre-K specifically, please reach out to us. We have a table out here. I can give you some more information, but we can send you what's called Jumpstart into Kindergarten. It's a really great calendar with daily activities to help make sure little ones are ready to go to kindergarten, because it's not like it used to be. They expect kids to know far more now than when I went to school. They do not teach names, addresses, those types of things. I expect kiddos know those things already. So this will help kiddos get ready to make sure they're ready to learn when they go to kindergarten. Any questions for me? Okay, we're happy to be here. This is our first time sponsoring to have the opportunity to do that. Like I said, we do have a table down the hall, so please make sure you visit us, and I'm happy to share a little bit about what we do. So enjoy.
Hi everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to the 2023 Juneteenth Conference. I'm really honored to be included. I'm giving you my presentation on adoption abolition. This is the first time I've given this presentation publicly. And as an adoptee and abolitionist, it's really hard to get a platform for people who want to hear what I have to say. And so I'm just so thankful for Tamika, for the organizers at Young Professionals of Color in Greater Harrisburg, put this together. It's such an honor to be here and be able to give you this presentation today. My name is Ryan Jabbar, artist. I am an adoptee, an activist, a memoirist, and a poet. Here, let me flip through. Well, so the name of, I'm going to be speaking to you about symbolic systems of prison trafficking and subjugation. I really speak generally about these things because it's hard to lump them into one thing. But I'm talking about human trafficking specifically, the prison and industrial complex specifically, and subjugation in general. The specific, this will just work. Well, we have a thing. It was just working. Yeah, when I moved something. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about an understanding of adoption as not a thing standard. And this might seem like extreme language if you being plugged into the mainstream discourse of what's going on with adoption. But in terms of the erasure and extraction that happens as a result of the adoption process, it's actually much closer to what happens and occurs in markets involving slavery and enslavement than it is to a humanitarian as it is presented to us. As I said, my name is as I said, y'all, my name is Ryan Jabbar. It's an identity crisis name. I was gonna like give some space and time to kind of talking through my name, but in the interest of time, if you're interested about hearing about my name, my different names, I'd be happy to talk with you about that. Afterwards, and if you're interested in like learning more about my work, you can read some of my publications and sign up for my newsletter at on my website. So I think that the first step to abolition is really educating yourself. You really have to know what you're speaking about, what you believe before you can speak about it. If you might feel you know a lot about what you want to say, but if you don't actually know a lot about what you want to say, it's really hard to get up in front of the house, I guess, and talk about what you want to say, because you might get emotional or you might get flustered. So it's really important to really focus on self-education. And the way that I did this was really by understanding that who and what I give my attention to is so crucial and so important. There's things I have to give my attention to: bills, mortgages, rent, phone bills, electricity. And there's things I can choose to give my attention to, just each other, and choose to give my attention to. And that's so important because there's so many things that are trying to take our attention all the time, particularly in this modern world. Particularly, we're plugged into cell phones all the time. It's just stealing all of our attention. And so to give our attention to each other, it really takes a lot, because we're not used to giving attention to ourselves. We have to figure out how to first give attention to ourselves before we might be able to figure out how to give it to someone else. And so understanding that your attention is your greatest resource is really valuable. Who you're giving it to, who you have to give it to, but who you choose to give it to is really important. This is my case for paying attention to each other. There's so many things we have to pay attention to. Sure, you have to. You're going to have to pay your bills. You're going to have to go to work and do these things. But don't get so much attention. Just you're going to have to do that every month. You're going to have to do that every day. You're going to know your work schedule. There's some of my friends who I really love. Do the absolute least you can do for these systems. These are the systems that we have to interact with, so that you can do the most for the systems you choose to interact with, which is each other. So all we have to do really to start paying attention to other people is to start paying attention to ourselves and start believing ourselves. Because once we believe ourselves, it'll be impossible not to believe everyone else. It really is that simple. It's really complex to start believing yourself, but once you start believing yourself, it becomes really easy to start. And then nobody's listening. There's so many things that are going to be taking our attention. Nobody's listening. And so people who are listening, it might seem like your friends or people who have always been listening, but then you start saying something new and they're still listening. Express appreciation. Just be like, thank you, friend, for listening. Thank you. I can think of like 2 friends who always show up to me, no matter how much I change, no matter how much I move away from past versions of myself. They're always right there, changing a checking in on. And those people who are paying attention, that's important. That's the people who are paying attention to you. So appreciate that. Just be like, hey, thanks for watching. It seems really simple, but expressing appreciation for the people who are paying attention to you will return to you. So one thing that's really important to me, like this model of paying attention to each other, it is finding solidarity within our movements of abolition. There aren't any structures or systems that in place that I might latch onto to figure out easily how to abolish adoption. I don't know how to do it. What I can do is look at movements that are already in place to inform how I might figure out how to do so. It's a way of learning from each other, just as moving forward together. So maybe I don't know how to move forward with my own particular abolition work, which is based in adoption, but I do know that there's lots of folks in Harrisburg who are actively working to abolish the prison industrial complex. I can latch on. I can go attend to their meetings. I can support their cause. I can watch how they're organized and watch their tactics. Watch what they're not only taking apart but also building, and be inspired by that, and then start to do it in my own understanding of how to break down these systems inside of myself first, so I can start to figure out how to break them down inside of me in the world around me. And so in this way, our work is completely connected and interlinked. And so even though I might not know how to abolish the systems of subjugation and trafficking that I didn't want to abolish, I do know I can start to support the abolishment of the prison industrial complex and learn expansively how to abolish these systems and structures. In this way, we can create models where none exist. Where when I'm completely lost, I look to plants. I really do. I look to my house plants, because there's no models in humanity or society for what we're trying to do. But when you look at houseplants, this is maybe I should let me go back a few tangents. I was just saying this last year right before I started, so I'm gonna go back, not go down there, but just talk about how we can learn from nature, because the structures that we need, they don't exist in society. So we have to look to nature, to how plants are doing, to how plants grow, to how plants support each other, to how plants have networks that we've been conditioned to believe don't exist, but they actually do. So how do we recondition ourselves and expel this indoctrination so that we can start to understand how intricately we are a part of this system of plants, of air, of water. Particularly relevant with what's going on with the water right now. Again, our attention is our greatest resource, but we are each other's greatest resource. Yeah. So that's important that's an important distinction, because I put those things on both sides and I was like, oh, that's that's redundant, but it's like, no, our attention as an individual is our greatest resource. And we to each other are each other's greatest resource. This is why giving our attention to each other is so important. And so a case study, so I learned through a case study of lived experiences. I learned through my lived experience, and I learned by watching the lived experiences of others, which informed me how to tell my story. The first way I learned from myself is by believing myself. I've been gaslit into not believing myself for my entire life as a result of my white purchasers. I knew what they were doing to me. They claimed to be my family. I said, this is what you're doing to me. And they did not let me believe what I knew they were doing to me. They told me they were doing that I was privileged. They told me that I was lucky. They told me that I had escaped this and that. I hadn't. And so I really, because this unit, who I believed to be my family, taught me not to believe myself, the journey to believing myself was very difficult. And it's going to be difficult for all of us. Every single system that we are involved in, beginning with our education systems, are conditioning us away from ourselves. And so conditioning ourselves back to ourselves feels impossible. but it is just as simple as listening to myself. One way I listen to myself is by documenting my life and my experiences. I do that with journals. I've thought that I was actively journaling since 1992. I've actually been actively journaling since well before 1989. I was in my single digits. I was born in 1982. I recently organized all of my writing into reverse chronological order, and in this way I can travel all over the course of my life. And these things that were so that I could not see because I was being conditioned to not believe myself. I now can go back and travel along the course of my life and really understand from this perspective and place of safety I am now, what was happening to me then, so I can tell my story. Tell these really hard stories I never thought I would be telling. And this is the difference between a moment and a movement. A lot of times when we come into awareness of these systems that need to be abolished, the structures that need to be abolished, we find a lot of energy to do so. But that's just the moment, that's the moment. You feel like, oh, this has to go. I just became aware of this and there has to be something I can do right now to let this go. But you have to let that go too, because that's the base of capitalism that has you believing you might buy something that is the solution to something, but it's not. You got to slow the F down and stop buying things and start writing down your stories and start listening to other people who are telling you stories. Give me a moment. I just need to, this is a great place to do that, because I use zines. I'm a zine maker, and I make this is as I said at the beginning, I'm an adoptee activist writer, adoptee activist, memoirist, and poet. Over the last 2 years, as I move away from my family, I created my own MFA, and I wrote an immense body of work. And it's because I started believing myself. I wrote over 600 poems. I wrote 3 versions of my memoir, which are 3 drafts that are in the tens of thousands of words. 4 children's books, dozens of articles, hundreds of letters to real and imaginary people. My portfolio is huge, and I did this because I finally believed myself. All these things. And I organized my lifetime of writing into reverse chronological order, and I just read it, started believing myself, and started writing everything I had known, felt, and believed myself. And so to calm down and do more writing, I make zines. It's like weird because because I'm a writer, my rest also involves writing. Who you are is like who you are, And so like these things, like it's not up to me to define who you are, it's up to yourself. And sometimes it's not even up to you to define who you are, because we don't even know who we are, but we just are who we are. And as you come into this person, you're going to have to figure out how to rest from being that person. And it's usually going to involve being the person you are as you're resting. So I make zines. I literally write, like I feel like no one's listening to me. And so I write, I record what I've done so I can believe I've done it, so I can know I've done it. And other people really start to care. They really do. Because I care so much about what I'm doing. And so this is how I heal myself. This is how I recover. How I slow down from this really hard work of adoption. For example, when I can't stop writing, I make it. And it's a way to move. It's a way for me to move my passion into it. And then I print it out and I can hold it in my hand. Something I've done because abolition is really invisible work. And so we have to reward ourselves to this work. And so it's a way of recording what I've done for myself and others. In case capitalism threatens to take over even our social justice. We post about it on social media and we gotta move on. We post about it on social media and then we're on to the next thing. It's like, no, we have to celebrate our accomplishments. And not only that, we have to learn from them with the perspective of who we are continuously becoming. So every couple years, you're going to have to look back at what you've done because you're going to completely re-understand it differently because you've become a different person and you can see yourself differently. And this is why slowing down is so important, because if we are moving at the pace of capitalism and just on to the next thing, you're not going to be able to see. That's the point. And so this is the importance of community and rest through zines, through writing, through poetry. This is how I find community. And in my community, I find rest. Because I can talk about poetry, I can talk about zines. And then because I'm talking to people who understand me, the conversation just those two things. Thanks for listening to my presentation.
Yeah.
I want to go over like some of my resources. It's kind of a lot of resources, but if you are thinking about exploring any of the things I've talked about, just take a picture like once I've clicked through all three on each three of these slides, okay? So the first thing is this was a really influential anthology of adoptee writing that that really allowed me to start believing my own experiences as a trafficked person and understanding adoption is not a humanitarian act, that it's meant to control people. And it's meant to really invisibly reinforce and show who does and does not have power. And so through this book, I really listened by listening to other adoptee stories and reading other adoptee stories, because this is a very, very intellectualized academic piece of work. And so it really helps to us as adoptees, as trafficked people, to legitimize ourselves.
What do you mean by writing on transracial adoption? What do you mean transracial?
Transracial adoption? Yeah, absolutely. So this is edited by three. These are all transracial, transnational adoptees, and transracial, transnational adoption refers to the movement of children transnationally, internationally, and in interracial families. So, for example, I'm a transracial, transnational adoptee. I was born in India, adopted to Baltimore. My family is white. And so that makes me a transracial, transnational adoptee because I was born in India. I find myself in America. I was born in a brown family. I find myself in a white family. And so that kind of refers to it really just refers to the global nature of what's happening with adoption. A lot of times it's presented to us as like we're saving the children in the same way we see like the animal commercials, like with the heartbreaking music. It's the same market. It's just on mainly white adoptive parents to purchase mainly Black and brown children. There's obviously nuances to the discourse.
And I wonder, honestly, because I used to be a children abuse caseworker.
Yeah.
And throughout that process of working there, my job was to try and keep children in the home.
Yes.
But I winded up having to remove children from their home, and sometimes they didn't go back to their parents.
Yeah.
And it could have been a positive. Sometimes it was a positive, and sometimes I think it wasn't so positive.
Yeah.
But I've often wondered, because I've seen in Pennsylvania a lot of children of color who were adopted by Mennonites. And I've seen children, their hair's not done.
Ooh, that part.
And
the skin is terrible, the hair, and that was
really, they're really like,
yeah.
I'm not saying that that's abuse, so to speak, but I mean, it kind of draws.
Thank you so much for bringing this up, because though it might not be an intentional form of abuse, it is neglect, and neglect is a form of abuse. And then the other thing that I think that you bring up that's really important is the notion and the idea of family preservation, that by all means family preservation, preserving the family unit is important, but there are times it's just not possible. That doesn't mean that there should be a whole structure of selling babies, you know what I mean? But like that's my point. But sometimes it is necessary. But the thing is also in my experience with adoption, a lot of times it's like the immediate families who don't have the capacity, will, want, desire for the child, but the extended families do. But the legal systems really prioritize immediate families over extended families, which turns into a case for removal and extraction. So you really bring up the complex, like the really nuanced, complex things that we're dealing with, because also at the end of the day, we're dealing with the lives of children. So I'm really happy that you brought that up, and there is no answer. But this is particularly the hair care, particularly the skin care, is that's how I know that a child's adopted. When I see white parents with a black or brown child and they have terrible hair and terrible skin, I am like,
It's also the culture and not, I'm not.
it is the Mennonite culture, but it is also like, it is also larger white culture, but again, I'm getting slightly away from my talk, so maybe actually. So I just want to finish going through my resources, but can we finish chatting about this afterwards? No, no need to apologize, and thank you for breaking it open. Another book that I read is We Do This Till We Free Us by Miriam Makaba. It offers um, a really complex, also simple understanding of an abolitionist framework. And then Abolition Geography Essays Toward Liberation. Ruth Wilson Gilmore is one of my hugest inspirations in terms of abolition. And so really I put that on there. So her name would be there. I recommend you look up Wilson Gilmore. In terms of my next slide of resources, I have the Adoptee Voice e-zine. This is a contemporary presentation of adoptee personal narratives. And this is this e-zine provides a model of building community by writing together. This series is called Adoptees Disrupting Adoption Narrative Series. It's an adoptee-centered model of justice via storytelling, and it's a discussion of adoption and family separation, settler colonialism, white supremacy. It's really, really interesting. Prism reports does some really great reporting. We Are Holding This is an abolitionist zine for and by adopted foster and trafficked people, and this is a great model for community building and accountability. So I also have support. This is a online resource, Adoption is Prominent, and this is a hashtag on Instagram. It's another model, another contemporary model for storytelling and raising awareness of each other's stories through social media. Change Everything is a forthcoming book this December by abolitionist hero Ruth Wilson Gilmore. Because of social media, this is a case for cheering people on. I've cheered Ruth Wilson Gilmore on every time I see something that she does. I cheer her on. And we now have a passionate conversation about abolition with heroes who we can access them through social media. And then this is just a simple website on Wikipedia of how to make a zine. If I had more time, I would have walked you through the making workshop, but since I don't, I can direct you here to learn how to make your own. So thanks, John. Thanks, Lou.
All right, thank you everybody for showing up. I appreciate you. And so we good? We still gully, right? Hey, okay, just give me 20 minutes and I'll get us right through it. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Winnie Okello. I am the founder of HARP, which is a harassment and assault reporting platform. I'm an engineer by training, a social justice advocate by passion, and just all around community advocate, community organizer, all things human element of engineering. I say that right because I am an engineer by training, and too often people do not connect the fact that technical people need to actually be able to understand how to design and build and communicate with folks in community, because what is community about? Very simple. Community. Please remember that. You'll get productive. I am really passionate about abolition work, particularly decarceration, as well as education and awareness of harassment and assault, so that we can actually change our community. And I do mean community. Too often, folks conflate the word community with neighborhoods. Neighborhoods are not the same as community. We may live in neighborhoods, but it doesn't mean that we live in community. Because again, community requires us to do what? To work in what? Thank you, I appreciate y'all. So my presentation today will be about Juneteenth, a legacy of freedom through abolition, resistance, and resilience. Can everybody hear me? Yes. I sure hope so. Okay. And so, with that, I guess I'll just put you through. Okay, that we did. And so this session will be a journey of connecting the past to more current events by highlighting not only local, but global impact of abolition resistance. Oh, it touched it. Good one. Systemic oppression of enslaved people. And I say enslaved people, not slaves, because it's about a condition of your environment, not an intrinsic characteristic of who you are, correct? Because words matter, language matters, context matters. Three things: words matter, language matters, context matters. Say that again.
Words matter, language matters, context
I appreciate your family. So, high level, this was at the World Bank. I like to take pictures of all things Africa. If you haven't noticed, okay? This was from last year's Juneteenth, one of the Juneteenth events. Understanding that a whole lot of these people from here, I see you in here, right? It's important that we capture significant moments, even though they may seem insignificant and mundane to us, right? Because moments like this remind us that regardless of what we're doing, whatever the hats we wear across our lives, we all tend to come together when it comes to trying to do work for the community and for the culture, right? As an engineer, I'm part of NSBE, or by default as a Black engineer, right? I'm part of the National Society of Black Engineers, which our mission is, listen up, to increase the number of culturally responsible Black engineers who excel academically, succeed professionally, and positively impact the community. The first thing was what? Positively impact the community. Not about academics or professionalism, it's about community. And I was like, if you know this, DEI has been kind of like the trending thing, but I was like, hold up, the NSBE mission has been set for decades. The first thing that they say as an engineer, as a Black engineer, is to positively impact the community. Says something about how we do things, even in technical spaces, understanding that it's always for the culture and for the community, right? And if you know me, when I talk about global and local things, I use the word what? Okay. What's the combination? And if you have me tell me before, what's the combination word of global and local that I use a lot? Global. Yeah, global. I remember the word global a lot because it's about global, it brings together global and local context, right? Global issues, local solutions, global impact, right? Local issues, local approaches and context, global impact, right? That's what you don't want to miss. So when we talk about abolition, I said words matter, language matters, context matters, right? Abolition, the act or the action of an act of abolishing a system, practice, or institution. And yet, for some reason, it's still considered a taboo, really. People are scared to talk about abolition. You throw the word abolition out there and people are like, oh my God, right? Yeah. Some of like the most popular abolitionists, Frederick Douglass, and many others, right? Yes, right? When we talk about the context of abolition, I understand that seasons change the meaning and the context, because now these days it's the taboo-ized word is what? What, right? Same concept, right? Understand how words and linguistics change over time to perpetuate a particular narrative to people, right? So because it's a reflection of how you internalize systemic oppression in communities, right? Okay, and so as we all know, right, the 13th Amendment, a lot of people would reference that in terms of abolition of slavery, right? It was what? It said neither slavery, taking up space, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, the big word, except, right? We gloss right by through that, and that's why I said words matter, language matters, context matters, because this is really a legal document, right? And if there's one thing I've come to really understand and appreciate is the painstaking detail legal folks go through. If you're a legal folks in here, literally every word they put into a definition or a statute matters. Every comma, every space, every word matters. Okay? So, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. Okay? Shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Except punishment, crime, duly convicted, U.S. and any jurisdiction thereof. Right? And what? Because we still see elements of that today. And where do we see that most often? Thank you. The incarceration system, right? A lot of people call it what? The criminal justice system. How can you call it a criminal justice system if there's no justice in it? It's a criminal legal system. So please change the language until the systems actually change. The criminal legal system does exactly that, right? It reinstates a condition, an environment of enslavement. In 2023, we have rebranded slavery because we know what? A snake by any other name is still what? Okay, and so if I tell you, if I say, oh, this is a nyoka, do you have any context of what a nyoka is? But if I explain to you, a nyoka is something that can bite you. It's lizard. It can grow to X, Y feet. It's venomous. It's all these things. If I give you all the characteristics of a snake, what will your understanding of what a nyoka is? Thank you. Because nyoka is actually the Kiswahili word for snake. Okay? So a snake by any other name, language and context, still what? Understand that, enslavement included. Okay. And so did you also know that Pennsylvania was the first state, established state, to have to implement some sort of abolition? It was like abolition light, but it was the very first state to actually have some sort of abolition statute. Are we familiar with that? Good. I don't have to go through that because if you showed up to this, you know that. And we did it in February. But also the other thing is, did you know that the first established penitentiary was Pennsylvania? It's interesting the role that Pennsylvania plays in this whole, adventure, right? Like oftentimes we're like, oh, Pennsylvania and Harrisburg, but we're actually a really important aspect of the conversation around abolition, right? Around decarceration and the importance to decarcerate, right? In 2023 and moving forward. Because when we talk about enslavement of people, I appreciate that Brian brought us the concept of looking at things, especially when it comes to adoption or the movement of people from one area of this globe to another as human trafficking. Because we have to like break these things down. Is that we look at the story of enslavement of people, we forget that it included human trafficking, immense violence, abuse, sexual assault, labor abuse, child abuse, harassment, police brutality through slave patrols, and so on and so forth. Vile inhumanity that was codified and normalized through legal language, the Constitution. Right? Say slavery and enslavement, but it encapsulates a lot more in that singular word. And until we begin to break it down into this very many elements of how immensely screwed up it is, until you begin to call a thing, you don't realize just how traumatic and traumatizing it is, right? So, first established penitentiary was the Eastern Penitentiary. It was the most famous and expensive prison in the world. This is how certain folks talk about incarceration facilities. Okay? And then now it's actually a museum. People can go and, but I'm like, I know for me, I've walked in spaces such as that. And if you're connected with your ancestors and spirits, because I'm always like, the ancestors said no. It's like when you're connected to your higher power, your spiritual center of being, you understand that these spaces have a particular energy about them. They can't just go be messing around. As an African, I know. Right? And one of the things I was reading this was like, this was a prison designed to inspire or true regret in the hearts of the prison. But oftentimes you also see that people tend to be thrown into incarceration facilities before they actually have a chance to see a what? Adjudicator, a judge, a lawyer, anything like that. That's the reality, right? A lot of folks are held in pre-trial detention. And there's a lot to unpack just there, right? Because when we say, oh, you're innocent until proven guilty, but are you? Especially if you fit a particular bill. Because sometimes actually the person, your slave patroller who encounters you might be the judge, jury, and executioner. Okay? So let's learn to have a very clear conversation about this stuff. And you can't talk about that without talking about our next door neighbors. Hello. He's a good old DCP. DCP is that raggedy to the nth degree. And as I see, DCP and the police have been since the beginning. Okay? And this is why it's important to have very real conversations about abolition and decarceration in 2023, right? Because, again, if you attended the February session, as we were talking about the historical context of Harrisburg and the eradication of slavery and enslavement, when we were reviewing the document, it kept on talking about how the conditions at DCP were in 18 something. Think about that. Since the 1800s, Dauphin County Prison as a facility, as an institution, has been around. It has been around since folks had slaves in Pennsylvania. Because most people think of enslavement state as Southern. Folks don't connect that, oh, it came all the way up to Pennsylvania. There are Pennsylvania folks who owned slaves, who owned other human beings. Right? And even with that, okay, right? When we talk about how they were talking about enslavement and folks trying to escape slavery and the riots, right? Who gets to be termed a rioter versus folks fighting for freedom and equality and representation, right? Those who came from across the way on their boats, their fancy boats, and landed upon here and discovered this land that were already inhabited by other people, indigenous folks. They're like, I'm discovering you. They're considered what? Forefathers, like folks that are escaping to find their own freedom. And I'm like, where's the freedom for those who are here? Where's the freedom for those who you steal, you traffic across this, ocean, and you bring here for free labor, to extract free labor for the necro-capitalistic greed that continues to exist even today. Necro-capitalism, we'll talk about it in a second, right? And so, did y'all know Pennsylvania has its own constitution? I hope so. Education moment. Pennsylvania has its own constitution, and in Pennsylvania's constitution, Article 1, Section 13 addresses bail, fines, and punishment. It says excessive bail should not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel punishment inflicted. Is that the reality that we see today?
No.
Okay, because you gotta understand who then determines what bail is set. Exactly. Who determines what the fines are imposed? Well, yes, but it's also constricted by how the regulations, the policy, the statutes are written, which also tie to how the lawmakers that we vote in. So we, as a people, have a lot more authority and power. Don't give your power away to people who are actually there to serve you. When we say power to the people, it's for the people as well, because we are the ones who build power. If you join us for civic engagement politics, understand that power is to the people for them. Rule it correctly and accordingly. All right. And so when we talk about punishment, the infliction or imposition of a penalty as retribution for an offense. And we're talking about, or it could also be the rough treatment or handling inflicted on or suffered by a person or a thing. And also, the question is to determine what is excessive. You have to determine what is more that is necessary, normal, or desirable, or moderate. Okay. So, one of my favorite, plenty MLK quotes, not the usual one that people like to throw around. This is one of the ones that go to when they look at this context of decarceration and abolition of rebranded slavery and enslavement practices in 2023 is when MLK said, all we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. Say on paper. On paper. On paper. Yeah. And so then as I think about that, I ask, well, which paper? Which paper are you talking about? Because depending which paper you're looking at, it could be true. I was talking about the U.S. founding documents of 1776, where it says all men are created equal. Who men? Right? Right? Are you talking about the 1787 Three-Fifth Compromise, where we get to rationalize the very irrational BS about humanity, about those who we are supposed to be living in community with? I was talking about 1857, the Dred Scott decision, which pretty much says that African Americans had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. Which documents are we saying be true to when we request of that? of the communities that we live in and the government that are supposed to govern us. Yes. And so at the end of the day, what is the action? The call to action is what? Resistance. Right? It's the refusal to accept or comply with something, or the attempt to prevent something by action or argument. And when it comes to resistance, again, the subtext question, you gotta understand, to resist. What are we resisting? Where and when do we get to resist? Why and how matters when it comes to resistance. Right? Because the reality is, even as Ryan mentioned, it was what? A business. Oh, cruddy little excitement. It was a business, right? And we can't talk about enslavement and systemic oppression without addressing the racism and the classism that goes hand in hand together. Correct? So again, as I mentioned before, it included human trafficking, sexual abuse, trauma, child abuse, and so much more. Right? So we got to include all these things together and understand the connectivity back to the multi-land. Right? And understanding that when it comes to resistance, it has been a multi-generational effort, right? From the very beginning to the people we see today. If you are actively in the efforts for abolition, you are part of Black history, right? Because you have to say we have Black history, we have Black present, we have Black history. When it comes to the work of resistance, hopefully you know most of these people, if not all. And an interesting one here is, anybody know who this guy is? These are one of my favorites. Well, actually, all of them, most of them are. Some of them suck for various reasons. But I'm gonna let that be. You know, if you know, you know. Right? But yeah, Tucson, yes, number 3, yes. And then we got Christine Garbage. And we got, come on. Thank you. And then we got, come on, family. Okay. And then Tony came through Harrisburg like twice. You got thrown out and came back. Right? Family. Resistance comes in many forms, right? You're actually allowed to should know that you get to use your profession as a means to push the movement for us to create better and safer communities. You don't get to, abolition does not mean that you get to exclude it from your work, because you how much time you spend on your work. Think of how much time and energy and life work you commit to your profession, whatever that is. Whatever that is. Especially if it's homemaking. Understand that the work required, it must flow into every space that you find yourself. So yeah, we all know these guys, right? Two sides of the same coin. You can't talk about one without the other. Anyone know who this is? Because hopefully we know who she is, right? You know that she was actually a nurse. She was a nurse from Pennsylvania, who I believe she was in Louisiana at this point. It was after the killing of Philander Castillo. And this picture to me, it stands out to me because she seems so calm while the police are like, "You are a threat." Think about that. How threatening just simply being and existing in peace in a Black body is. Think about that. If you don't know who this is Tom Boya, and I had to plug him as a Kenya representative. Huh? No, it's Tom Boya. Tom Boya was actually a Kenyan. I would say that they're my people because we're bridging the gaps here. He was a Kenyan organizer for the labor industry, who actually came to speak in Washington before Kenya got its independence to advocate for the human rights movements here. Spoke alongside, or rather, in the same session with MLK. Right? He came to advocate for the full rights of Black people in the U.S. in a time while Kenya was literally still in years before Kenya was free from colonization. Like when I think about that, it blows my mind. Because too often, one of the things if you're Black or whatever, you understand, there's this like weird dichotomies of like, oh, am I Black? Am I African? They don't like us. We don't like them. Da, 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 da. But understanding that for generations, the work has always been about a Pan-African movement, understanding that we cannot advocate for freedom elsewhere unless we're advocating for freedom of all of us across the board. Okay? Trying to get and obviously Tupac, you can't forget him, and his mom, Asata. And we got Rosa Parks and Claudette Cloven. Hopefully you're familiar with those folks. All right. So at the end of the day, all I ask is please join the movement. How many of y'all are familiar with HARP and the Love and Action Process? Thank you. If you're not, I invite you to join us just during Juneteenth evening, 5 p.m., 5 to 6 p.m. It's only 1 hour, but it's a very powerful session of education and awareness of all the mess that goes on at DCP and really incarceration facilities across this country, right? Come to DCP Juneteenth, 5 to 6 p.m. Why? Because we're calling out the inhumanity that exists in our system, right? It's important to mobilize. It's important to get really granular about how we mobilize because data matters in this day and age, right? And also folks tend to say, well, give me the economic incentive, right? Folks are really keen on the economic incentive of any movement. And the question is, you gotta ask yourself why? When will humanity, health, and safety be prioritized over your economic greed, right? Because as you say, bail is often used to extend stays of incarceration. And did you know that since 2019, there's been at least 16 fatalities linked to DCP? At least, and it's high, yes. So think about that, right? When we think about the incarcerated folks, our friends and family, frenemies, right? Incarcerated folks get to be treated as discarded people. We discard them, we put them away, and be like, oh, that doesn't really matter as much. Whereas for me, as an engineer, as an environmentalist, I see it in the work that I do. When we talk about toxic prison, about clean air, clean environment, right? And how it not only impacts that space, but the communities around them, which tend to be environmental justice communities. Hopefully you're familiar with that term as well. We can have a chat about that, right? And again, going back to, did you know Pennsylvania? We'll get into that in a second. But there are guidelines actually that if incarceration facilities are not trying to care about the humanity of them, you can actually address it through other mechanisms. The EPA is the only agency, Environmental Protection Agency, is the only agency now with nationwide oversight of these facilities, as well as with other industries to ensure the compliance with federal environmental laws. Okay, they can conduct on-site monitoring of prisons and jails and respond to public tips and complaints and encourages self-disclosure of violations. It encourages, doesn't require it. So we as people have to do our part, right? It's about a collective shift in mindset, I would hope. So please join us, okay? June 19th, because this year our objective is to increase awareness of the horrifying practices inside DCP. We want to advocate for truly rehabilitative facilities that center trauma-informed health and wellness practices. And really importantly, we want to humanize and put faces to those who are incarcerated, right? And we want to increase civic engagement because that's what this is all about. So please pull up, that's June 19th, 5 to 6 p.m. And remember that, you know, resistance is important because everything that we do is interconnected. Everything that you do, regardless of where or what places you work in. And I mentioned necro-capitalism. We're familiar with capitalism. Necro, what does necro mean or refer to? So what is it? It's death via what? Y'all learning already. I like this. And so really understanding that also when it comes to this work, when we talk about the resilience that is required, we gotta admit that sometimes we do get tired. We get tired, and it's okay to say that. We ain't gotta be strong all the time because fatigue as an engineer, whenever I think of fatigue implies a cyclical loading, right? It's failure mode by cyclical loading. And the thing about fatigue, when you're talking about an engineering concept of material science, is you never have to stress it to its maximum capacity. It's always less than what its maximum capacity. But it's because of the cyclical loading of deformation and springing back that eventually it becomes rigid and fractures. Okay? So get out here, little engineering moment, right? Because again, we are addressing power, privilege, policies, and practices. And so again, this little poetry. Here's my ebook. Please download it and come back and talk to me. All right, Confessions of a Tired Black Woman, Navigating a Fragile White World is important. And so all this I do is because of what? Legacy. Understanding that we are who we are because of all those who came before us and all those who are to come through us. right? Whether it's directly or indirectly to the community, right? Because for me, I realized the work that I do matters because I came to a very clear understanding of who I am. And the question is, do you know who you are? Do you know who you are? And all those who carried you and all those whom you carried, right? Because I know that I am my mother's daughter, and I am my father's pride. I am my father's daughter. I'm my mother's daughter and my father's pride and joy, right? The manifestation of ancestors' prayers, blood, sweat, and tears, Danny Iska's love and Rosalia's discipline, the resilient seed bearing radicals and plumule of Kwarus whose words linger in the wind, whispering encouragement in due season. Jaberba Pode Tintole, Afungo Kiongozi, Kimbelimbele, Nambari Moja Yas, and Luo, my mother tongue. I am the daughter of a nation, of a people, a generation that is determined to not be silenced or sequestered into the back pages of history. I am Al-Kabulan spirit, roaring through the ages, forging a path as water on dry land, or streams giving way to boulders while polishing away the rough edges of the status quo. I am a reflection of grace, love, beauty, and brilliance, the humanity of life. I'm the creative force that runs in and through each and every one of us. I am all that I am. Yes, I am Winnie O. I am my mother's daughter and my father's pride and joy. And I appreciate you for taking your time today. Thank you.